and then I heard my name, and I thought it might be my sister because it didn't sound like someone who was, because obviously I was staff. And then they just go up the stairs and they didn't give me any privacy or anything. Like I had to. Yes.
How did that make you feel?
Disgusted. I'm really obsessed. I was crying my eyes out.
What did they say to you? What did they say they were there for?
Well, I was just asking them, can they just leave the female officer and can they please go downstairs? Obviously, they kind of wanted to get changed, and I was very obsessed about that. In the end, they did send the males down the stairs and the female officer sat with me. One, I was crying my eyes out, I was really upset. And then I said, what are you even here for? Because I was shocked. I was in utter shock. And she said, for malicious communications, hate crime and malicious communications. And I said, well, what for? And she's obviously, they said, we'll discuss that when we get to the, basically to the police station.
So you go to the station, and then they outline that it's these messages you sent to this friend that you've had this argument with. All connected to the fact that you yourself, as you say, have been assaulted. I'm not going to get into that so much. There's one of the more inflammatory things about this whole story, which Tucker Carlson picked up on, was that in the course of these text messages, you use the F word. We've already said what that word is. You've repeated it many times. I choose not to say it. You can do what you like. But that word, did you intend in the messages to be a derogatory, homophobic slur?
Absolutely.
Because that is the alleged crime. Is that you were promoting hate towards gay people by using that word.
First of all, a lot of my friends are gay. I am not homophobic in any way, shape or form. The word in question is a word that
outrageous.
It is.
Would say the people that use the N-word to describe people are racist.
Well, on the other F word, joining me on the panel, our host of Crucible, Andrew Wilson, author of Bisexual Basics and host of the Bisexual Brunch podcast, Lewis Oakley, host of Bet News, Vermont Hill, and the author and chief political writer at Spiked, Brendan O'Neill. Well, welcome to all of you. Brendan O'Neill, let me start with you. I just did this extraordinary interview with Elizabeth Kinney, which I know you guys have all listened to. What did you make of that? I mean, I could barely believe what I was hearing.
I think it's obscene. I mean, if what Elizabeth is saying is true, and I have no reason to doubt that it is, it sounds like a real double wrong has been done here. Firstly, there is the fact that someone was arrested for saying a word. That should never happen in public, whatever word they use, even if they use it in public. Secondly, she was arrested for using a word in a private communication. That is an outrage, completely and utterly obscene. That does take us into the territory of thought policing. If the state can pry on our private conversations, drag us up for things that we say to friends or frenemies or enemies, whoever it might be, that really does take us into Orwellian territory where the government has the right to snoop on what we say to fellow citizens. I think that is outrageous.
Lewis Oakley, I mean, to start with, as a gay man, did you get
Bisexual.
Oh, my apologies. As a bisexual man, are you offended by the F word?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely got connotations there that are offensive. I mean, it's used to demean people and say that, gay people are, subhuman, disgusting, less manly, and that's what's inferred by it. So when it's used as abuse for young kids, the young 15-year-olds that are being called this in the playground, it holds meaning. It, leads to mental health issues. It leads to people feeling that there is something.
But it's not being used as a homophobic slur. In other words, it's not being targeted at a gay person. And her explanation was that she lives in the north of England. I'll come to you. You might laugh, but I know there are parts of England where they would definitely not consider this to be a homophobic slur. They just do it as a bit of, as they see it, quite harmless nonsense. Now, we can argue about that. It's different to say over here, which everyone has a clear idea about. I don't think that this F word is seen in quite the same context. Hence why she used it here, but not in a way that can be remotely construed as homophobic, which then begs a question. Why has she been prosecuted for a hate crime? Promoting hate at gay people.
Can I just say, I think that it's almost worse that he was straight, you know, because what she's doing, she's really angry in the moment. I totally get it. And she's thinking, how can I insult this man that has done this terrible thing to me? And by the way, like, you know, I hope he gets convicted too. How can I demean him? I know I'll call him gay, because gay is so lower, gay is so, like, you know, anti-masculine, and that's the whole point. That was the way that was another way she could have used to describe
She
it.
said she was homophobic and wasn't saying it as a gay slur.
Okay, but so you wouldn't say that people it's just that between the faces.
Well, no, because I think there is a difference in severity of the words. I mean,
Racism is more important than sexuality.
well, it's an interesting arguable point. Mark, look, I would never use personally the F-word. I would certainly use the N-word probably in public. Probably is a qualitative difference between the two, I would say. I think that. Certainly, I can imagine a lot of people using it on playgrounds and stuff and not intending it to be a homophobic slur. So it's not as clear cut as you might think it is. Regardless, as Brendan said, you know, regardless of whether you think it is or isn't, the idea that you communicate that word in a private conversation to someone.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So you raised 2 points. The first one, homophobic slur. My point is, it can be a homophobic slur or a racist slur or an anti-Semitic slur or whatever, even if a person doesn't realize that that's what they're doing. In the United States, I spent a lot of time in locker rooms as an athlete. I spent a lot of times in fraternity houses. I spent a lot of time just in my neighborhood. And that word was used a lot. And it was often used not against gay people, although it certainly was used against gay people. It was also used against ostensibly straight people, as my colleague just said, for the purpose of demeaning, for joking. Sometimes it wasn't even an intense joke. Sometimes it wasn't outrage. It was just it was used ostensibly in a playful way. But the idea is, if the best way to mock you or to tease you or to make you seem less like a man in a society where being a man is the height of humanity, is to call you gay.
You'd never be arrested. Yes, hang on. You'd never be arrested in America for using that word, because the First Amendment would protect you. So you could be offensive in America in that way without actually treading into criminal activity, because the First Amendment is there to protect that very thing. Actually, it protects all speech, including hate speech.
So that's the second piece of it, right? I just wanted to address the idea of whether it's homophobic speech or not. But even if it's hate speech, let's say it rises to the level of hate speech, regardless, I don't think that the surveillance state should be overseeing us to decide when and where we're making the hate speech, even though I deplore hate speech. And then I also don't think the commercial state should be criminalizing or intensifying criminal penalties for using it. So yeah, it's awful to do. You shouldn't do it. But I could be the worst piece of human garbage on earth for using a word or a slur. It doesn't mean that I should get arrested for it. I think there's other ways to resolve that.
Yeah, Andrew Wilson, you know, it was very interesting when Tucker jumped me with this, because I wasn't aware of the case. So I was doing Tucker's show, we had a 90-minute chat about all sorts of things. The main premise of his conversation was that my country's gone to the dogs. I was defending it vigorously in some parts and agreeing with him in other parts, as I would America, by the way. Good and bad, but two great countries. However, when he went on this rant about this, it took me by surprise. I did not say this F word because I thought I might be arrested. I wasn't aware of the story. I went and did some research, and I discovered somebody had actually been arrested in my country for using that word in a text message. Having, she says, being beaten up by a guy, having treatment in hospital, and texting somebody that she believed to be partly responsible for her getting the beating. And that beating has not been properly investigated. So I don't know enough about that part of it to determine how clear-cut that all was. But regardless, the idea that she could use that word in a text message, and the next thing, 11 police are banging on, not even banging in, they're coming in, and she's having a bath, naked. Absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? December is Heart Awareness Month, which makes you think differently about the busy holidays. Stress rises, routines slip, and our bodies, especially the heart and blood vessels, feel the impact. Supporting healthy circulation becomes more than a wellness goal. It's essential. That's why it's important to boost your natural nitric oxide levels.
Ai, 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 tá explosão.
Blood Flow 7 by Juvenon is a natural daily supplement. It's specifically designed to support healthy circulation so you can feel energized, clear-headed, and vibrant again. Packed with natural ingredients, it works by boosting nitric oxide levels to relax the blood vessels. That means more oxygen and nutrients to your brain, heart, and muscles. All with one dose a day to improve stamina, heart, health, and vitality, all without caffeine or stimulants. Try Blood Flow -7 today and feel the difference where it matters most, inside your veins. Visit Bloodflow 7 and get 30% off your Bloodflow 7 order today.
Well, it's actually, I'm not even surprised. So the idea here is, I guess you could get SA'd, and if you call your assailant the, quote, F slur, you go to jail. Right? Some country you got there. By the way, let's point this out, that progressives have for years, as these guys say, hey, we don't want to, put in hate speech laws and have people arrested and this and that. They've been doing the same type of stuff for years. They do depersoning, debanking, deplatforming, keeping people away from their cash. If you touch on any issues that they don't like, they've been doing that for years to conservatives. So they're doing the exact same thing that the government over there is doing. They're just using the private marketplace to do it. So what they do is they will go on these massive campaigns to deperson a human being from society because they have wrongthink, or they say a word that makes somebody else upsetty spaghetti, right? That's what they do. And the fact of the matter is like, who gives a shit? Who cares if this woman didn't care? Who cares if she was like, you know what, I am homophobic, and I said it because I'm homophobic. That's her business. Right? You can say what you want. You're supposed to, at least in free nations, and that's not what you have there. And that was Tucker Carlson's point. You don't have a free nation there.
Thank you.
Out of interest, Andrew, would you use that word?
Sure, you use it all the time. It's one of the best ways to describe friends.
Would you use it on a show like this?
It's not meant to be. Look, it's not meant to be. Can I say it?
Would you say it? I mean, would you normally use a word
Well,
like
I wouldn't say it for the purposes of TOS, but I mean, if I was allowed to, sure, it's one of my favorite words to say. There's nothing wrong with the word. What happens is this. This word is not even being used as a homophobic slur, and it hasn't since I was a kid, okay? That's the truth. People call each other this all the time.
Yep.
Literally for fun, just because it's fun. You go, you like run into a buddy of yours, what's up, F slur? Right? You don't care, and you give each other.
I don't think that's true.
It's fun. It's fun. It is true.
Now you think it's true, huh? It is true.
People, they will tell you it is often used in a derogatory way and offensive way intended to demean them, and it's done all the time. I don't think
Yeah, sure. You know what? Everything. You can use any word as derogatory if you want to, or you can use words and they're not derogatory. It depends on the context, and we're social creatures. I'm tired of people acting like socially everybody's retarded. We know that there's context for words, and when you say in proper context this word to buddies and people in this, whatever, it's not a problem socially, and it never has been. And Mark might shake his head, but I bet you in high school he was calling half of his friends that word, and they were probably calling it too back. Why? Because it's funny. That's why it's funny. And it's
so here's was I no, but
you never used any derogatory term at school about anyone as a joke.
You're asking a different question now, didn't it? Okay,
Well,
I guess
generally.
a different question. Right? His question was again, the answer to the first question is no, I didn't use the F word in high school as he alleged. Second question is, have I ever used an offensive term? Absolutely. When I was a child, but as an adult, I like to think that I've grown beyond using the words that I used as a child. And I agree that social context matters, and I agree that we should always consider social context. We live in a society where gay people are still abused, where gay people are still slandered, where gay people are still physically assaulted, where gay people are marginalized, and that F word is used very often to do, and it's often accompanied by harm. And so if we know that, I agree, when you walk up to your friend and give him a high five and use that word, you may not be attempting to smuggle in homophobia. I don't think you are. But what I'm saying is we're normalizing a word that still accompanies harm and still kind of normalizes what we do and how we treat as a society, LGBTQI folk. And so I'm just saying,
Okay.
How can we pick a different word that doesn't cause all this hullabaloo?
All right, the bigger
Yeah,
issue.
the problem is like, because they're not as fun. And the reason is, the more that you try to make these pushbacks, these social pushbacks, and tell people what they can and can't say, it makes them want to say it more. And you know what, Mark? Like, that's what happens. The second you start making social pushback and say, hey, this word you've been calling your friends, and you guys have been joking around for years saying this stuff, you're not allowed to say it anymore, because now somebody's going to get too upset about it. It literally gives them incentive to say more. That's what happens. That's how social context actually works.
That's what I'm saying.
If you guys wouldn't make a big deal out of it, hang on, Mark, almost done. If you guys wouldn't make a big deal out of it, we wouldn't have a big deal, right? But you guys make the big deal out of it.
All right, let me bring in Brendan. Because,
So,
well, hang on, Matt. I'll come back to you. The bigger issue, it seems to me, here with the UK is that the Times newspaper recently revealed that police officers are making 12,000 arrests a year under Section 127 of the Communications Act and Section 1 of the Malicious Communications Act. In other words, similar instances to this. That's 13 arrests a day over offensive posts on social media and other platforms. Thousands of people being detained and questioned for sending messages that, quote, cause annoyance, inconvenience, or anxiety to others via the internet, telephone, or mail. There's been a 58% increase in these arrests since before the pandemic. This seems completely nuts to me. Joe Rogan said they've already arrested 12,000 people for social media posts. We got a clip of him talking about it.
They've already arrested 12,000 people for social media posts.
That's insane.
Above and beyond every other country. Way above Russia. Russia was like 400 last year. The UK's 12,000. Any criticism of immigration, any criticism of businesses, they come visit you. It's like someone's trying to destroy England.
Now, I would say, Brendan, that's probably a mischaracterization. If you actually went over the 12,000 cases, you could probably see very offensive things in there. I don't know, but I'm surmising it's not just criticizing an immigration policy that's causing the arrest. But in a country that's supposed to be one of the leaders of free speech historically in the world, this is pretty terrifying, isn't it? It's just Kafka stuff.
It's awful. It's like the Stasi, older. And they had the Stasi that would literally listen in on private conversations, that would literally rent out the apartment above the apartment of some dodgy person and listen through the floor to make sure they weren't saying problematic things. We now have a similar system in the UK. People are being arrested and in some cases punished for things they say. And it's now December, so any minute now we are going to see the annual controversy about the Pogues' great song Fairy Tale of New York, which has the famous lyric, "You scumbag, you maggot, you cheap, lousy, beep." We're not to say it apparently, but that is a great song. That word is often bleeped out. And this is another issue about these insulting words. I actually think what's most insulting to gay people, ethnic minority people, all sorts of minority groups, what's most insulting censorship says to them, you are such a weak part of society that we need to institute these laws and these rules to protect you from offensive words. It's actually a reversal of the great gains of the civil rights era when we have these kinds of rules that say we must protect these poor little dicks from hearing an offensive term. So I think these words are actually, the power of these words is less worrying to me than the power of censorship to infantilize minority groups and punish people who want to express themselves.
All right, Lewis, as a poor little dear, would you like to respond?
Well, yeah, I want to start with the numbers that we just talked about, because I think there is a point where we have to look at the reality of the modern world in which we live. Yes, we want to see more convictions for rape and murder. Those things are very hard to prove. Whereas communication, 90% of it now is online.
Why should the police be policing speech that doesn't actually incite specific violence, which is, to me, the line.
So Arnold
You cannot cross. Right? If I say to people, you live in a certain address, go around there and talk. Right, that's a clear incitement to violence against a specific individual. That's a criminal offence. I should be arrested for that, and there should be no issue with a free speech issue. But if I just want to say derogatory things, or you do to me, that should facilitate 11 police turning up at the door.
Well, two things. We have protected characteristics, right? We understand that in UK law, it was only 1967 in this country it stopped being illegal to be gay. It was only in 2003 that we got rid of things like Section 28. The law has had a real hand in causing stigma and discrimination against gay people here in 20-something years. So it's right that the law starts and says, you know, we've had a hand in this. We're going to sit there and protect you because it takes a preventative measure, much like the NHS, where it says, you know what, rather than treat you when you're sick, let's just prevent people from getting sick where we can. And it's the same thing. But if you can stop people hating on people for their individual identity, you can say you're stupid, you're an idiot, you've done this wrong, whatever. But if it's targeted, if it's hate on you because of your race,
Is it okay
because of your sexuality, because of your religion.
Why does nobody get arrested for calling Donald Trump a Nazi?
Well, no, but you know what? The Nazi thing is interesting because I do think.
It's interesting. It's probably the most egregious thing you could possibly do something is comparing him directly to Adolf Hitler, who murdered 12 million people, who gassed 6 million Jews in concentration camps. Right? The idea that that is not an arrestable offence by comparison to using the F word against a gay person seems to me to be completely disproportionate.
Well, you're absolutely right, but here's my thing. I think that the Nazi thing is an interesting thing because actually this proves that it's not a left or a right-wing issue because actually since the assassination of Charlie Kirk and those two attempts on Donald Trump's life, the right has been saying, watch your rhetoric. And they understand that whilst people aren't calling for violence against them, speaking about them as Nazis is increasing the likeliness of someone thinking, oh my god, there's Nazis, I better get a gun and do something about it. So they understand that
Calling for
not
their
calling
arrest.
for violence, but calling them words starts dehumanization that leads to violence. And I think we're
This is sick. This is actually sick what you're saying, dude. What you're saying is that you're calling for people to be arrested for words that make you upset. That's sick. This is the country of John Locke. Hang on, this is the country of John Locke. This is the country that was supposed to. We adopted our constitution based on these principles of free speech, and you know, you sick bastards are running around actually calling for the arrest of people because they say mean words. What the hell is wrong with you?
This is the thing with free speech. You can still make your point. You can still make your point. What is it that you can't say? It's not like people can't articulate themselves well. You can talk about crime statistics based on gender and sexuality and race, whatever you want. You just can't use discrimination.
Young care worker because she's been assaulted and is in hospital and is firing off angry thoughts while she's in a head injury, and she uses this F word, and because of that she ends up with a conviction.
Well, hold on, kids. We only got her side of the story. Reading the articles, it says that there was a series of abusive and homophobic messages. They showed the friend that said that she said
They
that
weren't homophobic.
that's what it was. You just said
It was hating somebody for their sexuality.
But so what, if I go up to someone in the street, and start attacking them,
Well, okay. By comparison, if I use the N word against
that's
you,
not a chance to respond.
right? Or if I use the N word against Andrew, is that a racist slur against him? No.
So if I go up in the street and start...
There has to be some intent.
No, if I start going up to someone in the street and screaming anti-Semitic things at them, and then it turns out they're not Jewish, at least I'm going to be like, oh well, like you went to attack someone based on the...
Hang on, that's my point though. If you can't be anti-Semitic against somebody who's not Jewish.
But we go back to, I think it's worse, because the gaze here was made to make him seem like less of a man, to sort of dehumanize him.
So what?
I don't think intent does.
He attacked a woman. He isn't human.
About the Nazi thing. What was your observation about that? I don't think people should be arrested for either, but it just seems to me an extraordinary disparity between you could just casually call somebody a Nazi and compare them to Adolf Hitler, and there's no accountability. But if you use the F word in private text, you get arrested for 11 cops.
Yeah, we're in like 7 directions here, so I'm going to just try and in like 10 seconds deal with each one. Total. First, I agree that no one should be arrested for any of this speech. Let me say that. So this is not a defense of arresting people, like it's being said. I'm not defending that. I do think the Nazi piece is different, but it doesn't mean that it should be responded to differently. For example, you may say to me, Piers, because you're policing my speech around not using the F word or the N word or whatever, that you're a fascist. That would be a reasonable criticism. I think you're wrong
but I think that'd be a reasonable criticism. But you'd be saying that my behavior is actually similar to that of a particular thing. When people are looking at Donald Trump's behavior, it's not casual at all. They're saying the extraordinary and maybe historically unprecedented way that he is undermining American democracy is reminiscent of the Nazi regime. You may disagree. I'm not telling you to be wrong or right.
You don't honestly think that. You honestly think Donald Trump is a Nazi?
Piers, if you allow me to finish, you understand that I'm not saying that. Just allow me to finish the sentence. My next sentence was, it does not matter whether you agree or disagree with the claim. The point is, I'm allowed to have a political ideology. I wouldn't use that claim. I wouldn't call Donald Trump a Nazi. But my point is it a slur? I believe that.
Is it a slur against Donald Trump?
No. Wow, that's right. Piers, I'm not saying no.
So it's not a slur to kill somebody. It's not a slur to call somebody a Nazi, but it is a slur to use the F word about somebody who's not even gay. Can you explain that?
No. I can't explain what you just said because that's not the point I'm making. You recharacterized what I said.
I'm not sure what the point is you're making.
What I'm saying, allow me to finish and you will. What I'm saying is, if you are making an analysis of somebody and you in good faith believe that their behavior, similar to if you call me a fascist, I don't think I'm a fascist, but you have a right to say that and I wouldn't call that a slur. If my behavior is reminiscent of that, similar to the Nazi or any other argument that you make, I'm not going to call it a slur just because I disagree with you. Where it becomes different is if I'm attacking somebody for their identity. Where I'm insulting somebody for their identity, that becomes a slur. And in the last example you made, Piers, where somebody calls somebody the F word or somebody high fives their friend, as my other colleague said, and gives them a high five and they're not even gay and they don't mean it that way, it may not be a slur, but you're still trafficking in homophobia. You're still trafficking in racism.
Hang on. This isn't illogical. This is actually illogical. Listen, I'll tell you why. The reason that this is illogical is
because allow me to respond, because every time you respond to something, I don't get to respond.
Hang on, I understand, but the foundation of your argument is these words cause harm based on social stigma, and the social stigma is caused because you're using a harmful word. Calling people Nazis and fascists would create this exact same stigma that you're saying these other protected classes deserve. Your argument is a contradiction. It's P and not P at the same time. It's contradictory. So either it's one or the other, Mark. Either the social stigma needs to be argued against. Hang on. And in the UK, people are getting arrested for calling Donald Trump a Nazi as much as they get arrested for calling somebody the F slur, because the social stigma is the thing that you're after. So you have to pick one, dude. Pick a lane.
All right. Now allow me to respond. Again, you have mischaracterized my argument. My point is not that social stigma is the predicate for deciding whether or not someone can say something or not. If it were, then you would be right. All words can have social stigma. I could call you a conservative.
What is it?
You can have a social stigma. You could call.
What determines it?
Allow me to finish. Please allow me to finish. You said something. Just allow me to finish. Let me do the same.
Yeah, I know. I just want the answer, though. What can it be?
You can either give the answer, let me talk, if you don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, what I'm saying is, again, if just all words can potentially have stigma. If you call me a bleeding heart liberal, I may find that to produce stigma for me. I'm not saying that stigma alone is the issue. Stigma is not the predicate for me. And again, I'm not making the case that anybody should be arrested for any of it because it's so gray and slippery. I'm saying don't arrest anybody for any of the slang or any of the slurs, any of the language, any of the words that have been used against people. I'm saying don't arrest anybody for any of it. But the distinction I'm making here is not one of slur versus or stigma versus non-stigma. What I'm saying is that as a community, we can certainly agree that assessing someone's behavior, even if it causes stigma, is okay. You not liking it isn't enough for me to stop saying it. What I'm saying is that we as a community decide that, hey, this particular word, this particular framework has historically caused harm to people, not based on what they believe, not based on anything they've done. I'm saying we can make different decisions. We may not agree with the decision. That's okay.
Mark.
But
That's stigma.
It's not.
You are getting
Let me jump in. I want to
Stigma is not the foundation for I can say
They just don't realize it.
It's not.
Let me ask Andrew a question.
You don't realize it.
Let me ask Andrew a
That's not what
question.
it's. Just repeatedly shouting it is doesn't change the fact that it's not. I'm not saying stigma.
Let me ask you a question.
I'm stipulating.
Let me ask a question.
I'm stipulating that we all have stigma.
Let me ask you a question of Andrew, which is about free speech, but it's a different twist on it. because it's all been very anti the UK, this debate, as indeed the debates raised in America about our free speech issues, which are legitimate. I agree. But a Reuters report recently said that more than 600 Americans were fined, suspended, placed under investigation, or disciplined by employers for comments about Charlie Kirk's assassination. That was after a review of court records, public statements, local media reports, and interviews. Some were dismissed after celebrating or mocking Kirk's death. 15 were punished for allegedly invoking karma or divine justice. 9 others were disciplined for variants on good riddance. Other offending punishments appeared to result in the killing or express hope that other Republican figures would be next. And we just had the president-elect of the Oxford Union in the UK, who was sort of removed from his presidency, which he was about to take over, because he had reacted in a sort of celebratory way when he heard the news of Charlie Kirk being shot. Now, in its way, is that not the very kind of censorship that you're talking about, or do you think there's a line between accountability to your employers and to police criminal activity?
No, the left has been depersonating, canceling people for I mean, my whole lifetime, and it has whipped up into a fervor since Trump's election, but even pre-election. They don't just deperson you, they debank you, they deplatform you, you're not allowed to say anything, they run massive harassment campaigns. The first time I've ever seen you poke the bear, they finally did something, and all that happened was some people lost their jobs. They weren't depersoned. They weren't completely ostracized from all of regular society because they said a no-no word. These were people who were celebrating in the streets horrific murder, which they likely contributed to through their own rhetoric. Right? That's what actually happened there. All that happened here, right, was for once the right actually pushed back after you poked us enough time. So, like, look, am I saying that people should get fired from their jobs? No, of course not. But what I am saying is this, is that there's a clear difference between depersoning and debanking people and ostracizing them from society completely, and an employer saying you don't represent my company very well, so you're fired.
Okay.
And that's the distinction.
All right, gotta leave it there.
Yeah,
Fascinating. I'm gonna leave it there, Mark. I'm sorry. We're out of time. A fascinating debate. Thank you all very much. The only boss around here is me. If you enjoy our show, we ask only one simple thing.
Duke Energy is being sued for the climate crisis.
Top-tier executives at Duke Energy Corporation.
Come on.
Police officers turned up.
Yeah.
They basically said you were committing.
Adam. Yeah, you might want to respond to a few things before.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's so much in there. I mean, first of all, Nick, think about your parents for a second. When you say that all drugs should be illegal, because if it wasn't for alcohol, you probably wouldn't be here right now. Drugs are
what drugs are you know, in their own best interest. But this almost isn't any debate anymore. I have to wonder if Nick's like playing a caricature of a statist here. This is like a you know, libertarian, you know, fantasy to get to debate someone so ridiculous who would say that all drugs should be illegal and government knows what's best. I mean, this is amazing. But the debate is like lower to this point where it's like, you live in fantasy land. No, you live in fantasy land. No, you need to get back to reality. No, you need to get back to reality. But I mean, the fundamental difference here with Nick, I think he said this in his answer to that last question about government knows best, and he said this on his podcast. And by the way, someone pointed out that Nick mentioned me in one of his podcasts recently.
What's up, guys? I've got a debate for you. This is young Nick Fuentes versus a libertarian. Title of the video is Nick Fuentes Debunks Libertarianism. Haven't watched the whole thing, but I can already tell that this balding man is about to get wrecked. So let's keep going.
And the first thing he said is that my audience, I'm going to quote him here, he said that my audience of conservatarians who believe this kind of stuff, like taxation, is theft. And it's like, dude, really? Don't you have an argument? You have to just go and call my fans conservatives? I mean, it's that's so much worse than calling them conservatarian, or but you should call them, you know, like status quo, establishmentarian. Conservative is defined as promoting the preservation of the existing social order. Like, no, we know that humanity can do better. Seriously. But this thing about, like, when you say government knows best, basically you're saying, I know best. You're not really for capitalism. You're for central planning. You say, I'm not really for these podcasts. I'm not really for capitalism. I'm for the interest of the public good. You're the guy who has the, intellectual arrogance, is it? That leads you to say, I know what's better for you than you know for yourself. Yes. That's just, I'm sorry, that's hilarious. Like you get to be the central planner. You're the one, and basically you're saying that I'm going to use government to force my idea of what's good for you on you. You are what's wrong with the world. You represent the world of statism, of insecure people using violence through government to control other people who are so insecure about their own sexual reproductive strategy that will attack other people for their sexual. You have to attack fags. In your podcast, you even talk about going after, like, that's your thing. You go, hello, gay people. You are going after fags. Like,
America's #1 chatcast
so
worldwide.
much obvious, you know, behind this, but what it is that fundamentally you think you're better than everybody else, and that you can decide policy and use government to force it on people and justify it by saying might makes right. Thank gosh you will never be elected to public office in the United States. At least I hope.
That's the pot called the kettle black, right? You know, I think you would know a lot about people who would never be elected to public office, considering you are one of those people. But if I could get a rebuttal in this, I think it's just hilarious to me. You talked about, well, and let's take your first claim. It's fascinating. You say, well, this is an argument that's degenerated to the point where you're just saying you're ridiculous. No, you're ridiculous. And it's funny because I gave a very cogent rebuttal to your statement that drugs should. I said, at what point, besides some arbitrary determination, can we objectively establish at what point a person hurts themselves and to what extent? I think we could all agree it's ridiculous, the idea that an infant totally can make competent decisions, and a toddler can make totally competent decisions. And then at what point it's arbitrary? So, and I will say you didn't answer that in your rebuttal. So that's the first point. You say that it's degenerated to name calling and this and that, and you use your entire rebuttal to my rebuttal to kind of grandstand about, he's a statist. Wait, I didn't interrupt you. I did not interrupt you. You're going to have to allow me to respond. And then you go on to say, well, I'm a caricature of a statist. I am a statist. I am 100% a statist. I am a conservative in the most traditional sense. And I used to be
Look at
like,
that.
I used to be a libertarian, but then I kind of gained just a little bit of experience in the real world, and I came to understand why it is necessary that force exists. Because we know what is good for people, we know what is good for society. And that's the biggest myth about liberalism in general. I mean, this is what, we go back to John Stuart Mill and utilitarians. John Stuart Mill said the reason we need liberty is not because liberty is sufficient in and of itself to justify a free government. That's not what he said. He did not say we need liberty because it's a no-brainer. Liberty is awesome. He said we need liberty so that we can figure out what is the best way for people to live. Because, well, we should be able to experiment, and we might not think it's a good way to live, but maybe it is. Well, I mean, that's entirely fiction. I'm a Catholic. I'm a student of history, and then I think we can basically understand. I think if we have a competent regime that is in power, they know what is in the interest of the public. For example, in Russia, I think Vladimir Putin knows what is good for the Russian people. I think in the case of many countries, in China, Xi Jinping, in Turkey, Erdogan, all the tyrants of the world, they know what is good and they execute the will of the people, and that is the task of government. Now, you're over there saying he thinks all drugs should be illegal. He means Tylenol and aspirin and Advil. Of course, I was talking about illicit drugs, currently illicit, which go from marijuana all the way up through amphetamines. And there are pharmaceutical applications, and they're given as pharmaceuticals, not sold on the street, not sold for recreational purposes in dispensaries in Colorado. And these are the drugs which I think should remain illegal. Alcohol, if it were my perfect world, if I were running the state and the state was absolute and it was theocratic in many ways, yeah, alcohol would be illegal. I think marijuana would be illegal. I think a lot of things would be illegal because we know that they're not good for people. Alcohol, marijuana, reconciliation, or rather communion with God. They're a substitute. They're filling a God-sized hole. And you could say, oh, well, they're for recreation or for that. And I understand there are some uses for that, but by and large, we find that marijuana leads to horrible effects in the brain. I'm not a scientist, but I've seen many studies, and I know lots of people who have taken marijuana regularly, and we know it's probably not the best thing for productivity. I think that's just generally that's the fundamental contention, is that you believe and your vision of human nature is effectively tabula rasa because you are a Lockean. You believe that, well, people are basically a blank slate and they're born good, they're born wanting peace and wanting love. And also, because you are a libertarian, I would assume you believe in neoclassical price theory, which posits that human beings are rational economic actors. We come up with all these like weird epistemological economic arguments where they say that, well, man is a completely rational actor. It's a marginal human being who is making decisions based on cost and quality, and this is why human beings are rational, and this is why we have an economic philosophy. But we know that's entirely not true. We know that people, on average, are around 100 IQ, and that varies certainly by a number of factors, including race. And we know that people cannot really be trusted to make totally competent, rational decisions. Now, we could use markets to economize scarce resources, and that's one of the best ways to direct resources in efficient ways. But to say that, well, the people know what is best for the public good, for the long-term good, for the health of society, is simply not borne out by the facts. We see this with free trade, for example. We have a massive trade deficit with the world because we have lowered all our trade barriers, and what is the result? Consumers do not choose American goods. Consumers choose foreign goods. And you might say, oh, well, here's it's goods and services flowing around. Isn't that a great thing? Well, what's happening in the long term is that we're selling off all of our investments. We're selling off real estate. We're selling off stocks. We're selling off debt. This is horrible for our economy. This is horrible for our nation. We're selling off all these long-term projects in exchange for short-term consumption. At the expense of the longer term and the more total public good. And that's just one example, but that's what the public does at large. So that's why we need the strong hand of the state to enforce order, to execute the will of the public. And so, yeah, I am a statist. It is a caricature, but it is, I think you're a caricature in many ways of the anarchist position. And that's why it's a good thing, because it's a diametric dialectical opposites.
Adam.
All right, you don't want to throw anything in there right now? I do. I want to say it's been an excellent show. I think we'll go for maybe more 15 more minutes or so. I got two questions that I'm personally interested in hearing the answer to. Which is more important, to build the wall or to end the Federal Reserve?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably build the wall. Build the wall. Because, and it's funny, that actually goes back to something Adam was saying. Adam, he said this before. He said, well, government can't do anything right. No, government can be awesome. If you have somebody who is competent, our current government is full of idiots. It's full of people who don't want to get anything done. So if we have somebody who is a man of action, who can truly execute the will of the public and is competent, then we can have someone who builds the wall. And we've seen in Hungary, in Israel, walls work. The wall in Israel shut down illegal immigration and reduced it by 95%. That's effective. And so we need to build a wall, reduce our immigration, and in doing so, get the demographics of the country under control. We don't want all these low IQ immigrants and take our stuff and eat our food and be a leech on the public dole. We don't need that. If that continues, we won't have a country in 50 years. And forget government for a moment. We won't have a nation. A nation absent a government is a single unified people, linguistically, by ancestry, by custom, by religion. We need a nation again. We're right now, in some ways Adam is right, we have a tyrannical state and just this mass of just an incoherent, Teddy Roosevelt called the polyglot boarding house of the world, and a state presiding over it. We need a nation, and we need a national government with national vigor and energy, and it starts with the wall. So I would say Federal Reserve, to end that, is extremely important because that's how you shut down the welfare state and the military. The wall has to come first.
Adam. Yeah? What's your response to that, sir? Obviously, you're going to choose over the Federal Reserve over the wall. And can you tell us why? I don't want either the Federal Reserve or the wall. Okay. That makes sense. We get rid of both of them. All right, cool. I want freedom of money, and I want freedom of movement. Cool.
The libertarian guy was and speechless, huh? Who do you think won that debate? Leave a comment. I agree with Nick on this one. We do need the government to, like right now we have a huge government that costs us a ton of money, full of women, full of minorities, full of people who with the Republican Party as we speak. The Heritage Foundation is going through a whole lot because their president sort of defended Tucker Carlson's interview with white supremacist, racist, Nazi lover Nick Fuentes. Now, that same Nick Fuentes has a mixed ethnic background, including Mexican, Italian, Irish. He literally has said some absolutely wildish, outlandish, racist stuff. He's got millions following him. They love him. This is a march for him.
He's got a million incel losers following him. No real man.
Everybody kind of realizes women need to be taken down a peg. Women are in control. Women are running our lives. They're clearly not up to the task. They need to be taken down a peg. And equally, just like the obfuscation with Jews, you have all these people saying, no, that's not the problem. The problem is modern women. They say it's all these degenerate modern women. You need to find yourself a good girl who's traditional and Christian and conservative. It's like they're telling us what to do, too. They're talking way too much, too. Half the time when you go on Twitter and you have some stupid bitch wagging her finger in your face, she's a Christian. She's got a Proverbs in bio. She's got a Bible verse in her bio. People say, no, it's just those degenerate, modern, left-wing, blue-haired feminist girls. I want
I want a good trad Christian girl. Half the time it's the girls with the Bible verses in the bio that are the problem. So they're always coming up with, no, it's not the Jews, no, it's not women, no, it's not blacks. It's actually real. No, it isn't at all. Jews are running society, women need to shut the fuck up, blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part, and we would live in paradise. It's that simple. It's literally that simple. Anyway. So that's the big picture. You know, that's your macro level. 30,000.
We're not done. Check this out.
Women don't support me. Women are irrational and sensitive. It's just like my whole life. My whole life. Because I was always like the class clown. I was always like bullying women. And women have always been like simultaneously charmed, but also like, oh, stop it. Oh, you're so annoying. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. That's how
No one was charmed by you, Nick. Not one.
With like my personality type, where you're like a rascal. You know, you're like a bastard. And they're kind of like a rule breaker and stuff. And so women simultaneously
Do the work.
by that, but they also have to pretend like they're not, because women, it's sort of like how